In your opinion, what is the number one greatest thing about communication? What's most important about it?
You know, rather than approach communication from the vantage point of why it's important, which kind of implies that I need to prove something that someone out there might not believe.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think about it in terms of how is it important? Because I think it's better to appeal to the fact that everyone already knows this, everyone already accepts this. And once we get to that point, then we can say, all right, how can we get better at this thing that we all agree about as being important? So before we start with communication, let's start with something more fundamental, desire. We all have desires, right? We all have things that we want. Even if the things that we want are best described in spiritual terms. I just want peace of mind. I just want love. We all have something that we want, experiences, objects, achievements, what have you. And we all already are involved in the process of using communication as our primary tool to go about creating the results that matter most to us. So at the mundane level of passing the salt, or at the level of paying the rent or negotiating a business deal, right, at the level of asking someone to have a cup of coffee with you, at the level of just getting to know a person or asking permission for something, whatever it may be, communication is that primary tool, and no one needs to be argued into using it. Everybody communicates. Right. Even at the level of being a baby, you know, we only have like one thing that we do, which is cry, but we let you know, like, hey, those cries are intentional. I'm sleepy, you know, I'm hungry, feed me, right? And as we grow older, we develop more sophisticated methodologies for communicating. But from the moment that we are infants, we know at a visceral level that communication is important, because our desires are important to us, and communication is the way that we get there. So anytime you improve your ability to communicate, you are improving your ability to get what you want out of life. You are improving your ability to create the results that matter most to you. Communication is a creative act that when you communicate, you are not merely describing, but you are actually prescribing. You are not merely depicting the way the world is, but you are making it and molding it into what you want it to be through the power of language. And you don't need to believe in anything mystical in order to accept this as true. Like, you and I created the reality using language of us being here having this conversation. We use language to establish an agreement, to establish a context, to establish an agenda. And here we are. This is something that didn't exist 2 weeks ago. I wasn't thinking about this. You wasn't thinking about it. And through language, we made it happen. So what I love most about language is that it is a fundamental expression of our creative power as human beings, of our ability to alter the world, to not accept things as they are, as being fixed and permanent, but to expand them and open the door to new possibilities. That's why communication is important to me, and that's how it is important to everyone else.
Right. And what excites me too is you were talking about, you know, it's just an opportunity to expand what we know and what we learn, because communication is kind of the foundation to all of that. And I think back to Aristotle's era, you know, where we didn't have any of the technology that we have today. And Aristotle was one of the first to study communication. And then you look at where we are today, and you look at how intentional communication is able to communicate big ideas like never before. Because, you know, we're facing a really exciting and terrifying time. You know, if you would have told anyone a year ago, especially in my background, that I wasn't going to go to college, and I got this backlash too. It was, you know, so what's your plan? Are you going to work at Walmart for the rest of your life? You know, and I got that serious question. But throughout that process of me deciding not to go to college, which is a new idea, which is a progressive idea, I learned how to communicate it better and better, to the point that I was, you know, delivering that idea in front of 1,500 people at one point, and they didn't all think that I was absolutely crazy. So it's exciting to think, what are the other ideas out there that are either technology or just like philosophically exciting that people just haven't been able to communicate yet. And I think that's what makes me so excited about specifically what I'm trying to do with Lyceum is that there's so many tech entrepreneurs and so many people who have great ideas, but sometimes they haven't even been thought of yet because of their communication is not at the level that it should be. And I think that if everyone strives to be at a new level of communication, that only means more conversations, and that only means more ideas, and that only means a cooler and a brighter future.
Oh, what you're touching on right now is so important, because many people stereotype communication into the category of like public speaking or persuasive speech. Communication is about me getting someone other than me to do the things I want them to do. Mm-hmm. But communication isn't just a matter of articulating existing thoughts, but it's also a matter of clarifying and achieving new thoughts. The very act of trying to express yourself creates a different kind of relationship to your thoughts. Like, you know this from writing or giving a speech, it requires a different quality of understanding to talk about something than it does to merely understand it for yourself. So communicating and practicing your ability to communicate can actually be a way of improving your own ability to do philosophy. A second thing I say about this too is that thinking is a kind of internal communication.
Right.
We often think in language, and how many times do we go about our day just kind of talking to ourselves? We say like, I hate this day. I hate my life. Like that's communication, right? We're not saying it out loud, but we're saying it to ourselves. And there's a significant amount of room for changing the way that we understand that, for altering the practices in relation to that. So one example of this is one of my favorite books, George Lakoff's Metaphors We Live By. He talks about how the language that we use to describe the world, it doesn't merely express the way we think, but it shapes the way we think. So you take, for example, what he calls the argument as war metaphor. When you think about the language that we use to talk about arguments, we use the language of battle, the language of warfare. We say things like, Abby shot down my arguments. I tried to knock down her position, but she, but she beat me in the debate. You saw this language of warfare. Now, think about what the experience feels like to actually be in an argument. For most people, most of the time, it feels like a fight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what Lakoff says is, this isn't a coincidence. The fact that we rely on this kind of linguistic apparatus to talk about arguments actually affects the way that we think about arguments, and that affects the way we experience arguments. And so if you want to change the experience of an argument, you got to change the way you communicate with yourself and with others about what an argument actually is. And that applies to so much more in life. So practicing your communication skills is so much more than standing in front of a stage and being able to deliver a business pitch, which is immensely valuable, but it's also a core practice in personal development that opens you up to new possibilities in your own life.